Welcome, everyone, to our latest episode of Rebecca and Rebecca. So, I'm Rebecca Reed, and this is my friend and partner, Rebecca Yager.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. We're doing this in the morning already.
Yeah, hello. So we are so excited today to have, yes, we do have our coffee. I think we all have our coffee with us. So
Yep.
we're welcoming our guest today, Abbey Downey. And I'm going to just steal this little intro from your website, Abby. So and let people know a little bit more about you. First of all, Abby and I are friends. We've known each other for a while now. I don't even know how many years it's been. We actually attended ACFW together and roomed together in Nashville one time, and that was a lot of fun. So we're both from Indiana, so we're kind of ganging up on Texas today with Indiana people, but that's okay. I'm sure Rebecca will hold her own. Um,
Texas can handle it.
Texas can handle it. All right, good deal. All right, so Abby Downey writes sweet, uplifting romance, usually historical, always including faith. She loves creating stories with strong heroines, heroes who do the right thing in the end, and historical details that add a dash of fun. While writing has always been the best way she could make sense of the world, she never dreamed it would also one day be her career. It took many job changes and false starts before God led her to write stories. And we're going to specifically be talking about the first book in her Adventurous Hearts series from Wild Heart Books, which released in February of this year. And I know books 2 and 3 are coming. She just recently showed us the beautiful cover of book 2, which is coming this November. And then the next book is next July, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. She also has 2 books published with Love Inspired Historical under her pen name, Molly Campbell. So, welcome, Abby. We're so glad you're here. Um,
It's great
and
to be here with you guys this morning. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, um, like I said, we've known each other for a while. We serve on the ACFW Indiana board together. She's our treasurer, and we're really happy to have her in that capacity. But today we're going to talk about books because that's what we talk about on this podcast is books. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in writing?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned very frequently when I'm talking to people about writing, um, while I've always been a reader and been someone who would write to kind of process my thoughts and things, I didn't ever think that I was creative enough to write fiction. So I did a lot of other creative things. I've always been musical and I did a lot of crafting, like before I had kids. But when they were very little, it's so hard to get out like craft supplies and spread out a big project or something with toddlers in your house. So I needed something creative to kind of give myself an outlet when they were very little. And I started writing and um, tried my hand at fiction. And I'm so excited that it stuck because I really enjoy it.
Well, I love I'm gonna I don't even know where to start. Your website tagline I really liked. Happily ever after meets hope for tomorrow. And I love that. And in reading An Uncertain Road and then taking a sneak peek at An Unexpected Catch, which is the next one, right?
Yep.
Looking at those, your heroines, historical, but gosh, they do unusual jobs for the time, especially for the historical. So what led you down this path of picking out these characters?
Well, I'm always drawn to real history, and all of the women in this series are based off of real women in history. Um, and it's just things that I've stumbled across. I started this series with the thought of doing the Olympics quite a few years ago. I wrote a story set at the 1900 Paris Olympics. Um, that they had a World's Fair that year. It was a whole huge thing in Paris, and had a heroine who was did the equestrian competitions in the Olympics. And there was a real woman who rode in the equestrian competitions that year. Um, and in starting my research for that, I just every sport I looked at, there were women who were doing these things early on. in the same like professional levels as men were doing them. And we think of, women in history being kind of relegated to certain, to being at home or to certain careers that were deemed appropriate. But when you look at some of these more adventurous fields, women were always right there at the very beginning and succeeding really well. And at some point in time, either culture told them that wasn't appropriate, or men came in and, like with the racing, men came in and banned women from racing early on. But they were there before that and succeeding and doing really well. So I just find those stories fascinating and wanted to kind of shed some light on those real moments from history.
Well, I'm a fan of that whole thing. I mean, I have a similar story with a woman jockey, but so I love that you've done that. I thought the auto racing was quite interesting, and the details that you included were fascinating. And I know, and then when I read it was about a real person, it made it even more interesting, I think. So the racing was quite different back then too from what we know today. So that also added an interesting element. I think anybody who's interested in modern racing would find the origins of the sport to be quite fascinating. So when you're like looking at a story like this, how much time does it take you to do the research? Do you do it ahead? Like, do you preload the research, or do you kind of just wait and see what happens? Are you a planner? Do you plan, or do you like see what happens and then research what you need later? We've talked to a lot of people who do each one, so I'm curious as to which one you are.
I'm a little mix of both. I do outline my stories to an extent. Usually it's just the plot, like just the big pieces of what's happening when, because a lot of time my stories are revolving around actual historical settings. So like with An Uncertain Road, there was an actual timeline for this race. I used the actual timeline from the 1905 Glidden Tour, which is the race that they're in during the book. So I did have to research all that and figure out how to piece together my plot around where they would have been in the race. All of that timing is accurate to what happened in 1905. So I do have to do research like that, and I want to get the basics of how was it functioning, like with my the second book in the series, An Unexpected Catch. How was baseball being played in 1907? How were the rules different? How were things set up? So I do all of that ahead of time. I know I'm going to need those facts. But as I go, I always discover things. I'll need something to fill in a scene, and I get an inspiration. I'm like, oh, this would be a fun thing to include, but I have no idea how this worked at that time. So then I'll have to go back and research more. I usually will write out everything I can in that scene and then research later and put most of the details back in my editing phase. So it's kind of a mix of both for me.
Yeah, I can imagine you can only plan to a certain thing until you hit the mark where you need to research more. Is there anything in your research that really surprised you, especially when it came to An Uncertain Road? Was there something unexpected that popped up that you might recall at this point in time?
I know it's
or
hard when
with
you're
an
working.
unexpected or with a unexpected catch.
Yeah.
Uncertain Road, unexpected catch.
Yes, that's right. I know the titles are, you got to keep them straight. Um, it is hard to think back that far because I am 2 books ahead now of this one. I think some of my most interesting research actually didn't have that much to do with the racing. Um, and it was more, there's a moment, a scene where they stop at Coney Island before the race begins as a little side trip. And the research for that was so stinking fun. It was just to research old time Coney Island and all the interesting rides or attractions that they had there at the time. And my very favorite scene in the book happens there when they go on an attraction called A Trip to the Moon, where they created these like moving seats and then these canvas backdrops that were painted to simulate a ship like lifting off from Earth and going to the moon and landing on the moon. And then the people would get off the ride and go through this hallway that was painted, like the walls were painted and decorated like they kind of thought the surface of the moon might look like. And they would go into this room where I only found one piece of evidence to support this, but I thought it was so funny I had to include it. Supposedly there was green cheese like set in on little spots around the wall that you could like take off and sample this green cheese, and I thought it was the most ridiculous thing. And it sounded terrible because you can imagine no air conditioning, Coney Island in the summer, that cheese is not going to be good. So it
No.
was just the funniest thing I think that I ran across, and I like I said, I only found one source to support it, but I just thought it was too good not to include.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a hilarious scene in the
Yeah.
book too. I
Yes,
loved
it's
it.
also a fun scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun to write. Well, with the research you have to do for your books, about how long does it take you to write a book, to put it all together? And I know that can vary, but
Yeah. If I don't have a deadline, it generally takes me about a year. Now, An Uncertain Road took longer because I hadn't planned out everything at the beginning like I like to. I just kind of started writing. I was in between publishers. I didn't really know what direction I was going to take things, so I kind of just was going to run with this idea and see if I could get a whole novel out of it. And so that one took a little longer because I had to go back and rewrite a lot of things. But generally, it takes me uh, if I have unlimited time, it takes me about 6 months to draft a book, and then 4 to 6 months to do all the edits that I like to do. With Wild Heart Books, I'm trying to work on having some faster deadlines so I can write books, a few more books more often. And so I've got about 8 months in between book deadlines on this one. And so far it's going okay. It's it's kind of a lot to push through, but I'm getting there and I don't think I mind too much. So that's about 4 months for drafting and then um a few months for editing and things like that. 5 months, I guess, for drafting and 4 months for editing.
yeah, that's a pretty intense schedule. So do you have a daily writing schedule? Do you still have kids at home?
I do have kids at home, but they're in school. We have an excellent public school that they go to. So during the school year, I do have most of my daytime. I have a day job, but it's very flexible and only a few hours a week. So I'm really thankful that I have time to be able to block out in my schedule for writing. So yeah, I like to write Monday through Friday. Um, and I usually block out an hour or two each of those days for dedicated like writing, just sitting writing. And then I'll try to make time also for doing any little bits of research I need to do or figuring out if I've got a plot hole in my outline and I need to go back and fix it so I can write the next day.
Mhm.
So it's working out pretty well to have that time in my day and be able to schedule it.
Does it shift in the summertime now that we're in summer?
I never think it will, but we're at that point right now that my kids have been out of school for a week, and I'm like, it's been really hit and miss. So whether I can get my writing in, I never think it's going to affect it that much, but it always does. So yeah, I will get in a rhythm and I'll find those little bits of time. I like to just fit it in where I have an hour in between other things or something like that. Um, so I'll find those moments here and get back into it.
I think that's good advice for other writers. We do like to talk to writers as well as readers here on this, that even if your schedule gets, because your schedule is going to get mixed up, it's life. Things are going to happen. So being able to find the bits of time, and I know some people can't do that. They've got to prepare and have, a 4-hour block of time, but I don't know. You can get words down. And Rebecca, I think you can speak to this because you have a full-time job and
Yeah,
live
yesterday
farm.
I had a conference for school. Even though we're out of school, I had to go to this conference, and it was in Indianapolis, which is a 2-hour drive for us. So I took my computer and rode on the bus on the way there and rode on the bus on the way back. So, because I'm trying to get my words in every day too. So yeah, and it was we had to leave at a crazy hour. It was like we had to be at the school at 6:15 yesterday in the morning.
Mm.
It was like ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, you make use of the time you have, and I mean, I remember when I have kids. I don't have kids anymore. I just have Ziva. But
Your kids are still there. They're just grown. Don't say
well,
that.
I
Your
mean,
kids
I
are.
don't have kids at home. I do still have children. Yes, I didn't get rid of them or anything. But yes, they're not here to be like, "Hey, mom, can you do
Mhm.
this? Can you come see this? Can you, hey, he's looking at me wrong," or whatever those things that they do. So I don't have that, but I still have other, everybody has distractions. Everybody has things that come up. I don't think that anyone is immune no matter what stage of life you're in. So we all have things that demand our time, and it is a good idea, to try to use that time in between. I know, I think we talked with, I forget who it was, maybe Liz Tolsma, that would talked about how she thinks about the next scene when she's
Mhm.
doing dishes and things like
Mhm.
that, and that's a really good idea, is when you have other things, things that are normal everyday things you have to do, you can still use that time to plan out the next scene, think about your characters and all of that. So um, developing those types of habits, I think, is very important to busy writers.
I think so. Abby, did you receive any good advice as you were starting out, or is there something that has stuck with you that you've learned through the writing process that might help um, up and coming writers?
Yeah, there's we hear a lot of advice about writing, and you kind of have
Mhm.
to take it with a grain of salt. I
Mhm.
think for me, the biggest thing was well, I would say two things. One is to learn how to um, learn how to sort through all of that information about writing. Learn how to pick out the pieces that work for you, because not everything's going to work for you. Um, when I like to outline, like I said before. And I kind of thought it was an all or nothing thing at first. I have to outline the entire thing before I start writing, and I have to know exactly what's going to happen every step of the way. And that is not how my brain works. Like I said, I outline big pieces of the plot, so I know kind of what they're doing, or if there's a big moment in the story, I know where it's going to hit. I have no idea what they're feeling at that point, or even maybe where they are. Like, it's just bits and pieces are plotted. That's my process. That's what works for me. I fill it in better as I go and see where the story is when I get to that point, what they're feeling when they get to that point, what's already happened in the story. And that's something that I had to figure out for myself. So kind of find your own process, figure out what works for you, take the advice, but don't feel like you have to implement everything if it doesn't fit for you. And the other big thing that I like to tell people is to remember that your writing career is a journey, not like not the point in time that you're at. That the moment that you're in right now is not your entire writing career.
Mhm.
You don't have to jump in and be with your dream publisher right off the bat, or have all these readers right off the bat. Every step you take is going to contribute to your career. Um, you don't start there. Uh, and that's something that I think we know. Obviously we're not all going to jump in and be at our dream spot, but we do convince ourselves sometimes that we're a failure if we don't get there quickly. And I will say, as someone who sold the first book I ever wrote, which is not always something
Right.
to
Right.
recommend. um, that didn't mean that I had arrived, in my career. Um, Selling that first book doesn't mean that that's where your career is going to stay. I had a huge twist when my publisher, Love Inspired, stopped publishing historicals.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
had to decide where I was going to go. Was I going to switch my genre, or was I going to try to find another publisher? And that was rough. You get that contract and you think, I'm here. Okay, I've made it. I've done this. And I've heard from so many other writers who have been very successful and are much more well-known names than I am, that they've had these big twists in their careers as well. You can't count on that step being where you're going to be for the rest of your career. So try to take those twists and just remember this is okay, what's my next step forward? Don't stress about this isn't where I want to be. Think about what's the next step forward towards where you want to be. What can I do now that will move me that way?
I
That's,
actually think that's good life advice. Just
yeah.
Yes,
keep, you know.
absolutely. That's fantastic, honestly. And I think you're right. We it's so easy to just get discouraged. And when you're whether you're a writer or whatever, in any profession, um, not every day is gonna be the best day, but we're in charge of our attitude, right? And so keeping that mindset that it's just one day and it's gonna end and tomorrow's a new day and we can start over. I think that's very important just in general.
Me too. Um, is there a genre? Because I love what you're writing now, again, with these historical characters and these women that were doing amazing things, especially for their time. I think it's amazing anyway to be a race car driver or a baseball umpire. Is that the next one? Yeah.
Yep.
But in that time, but is there a genre you've dreamed about writing, or is there a book in you that you want to write that you haven't yet? Is there, a different idea percolating in your brain?
Well, I one thing I laugh about is I've always thought that it would be fun to write a children's book. Because they're just, they're so special. There's, when you get those books and you read them to your kids and you've grown up with a book or something, those books are just so special and they stick with you. And I thought I just love them. They're so fun. The cadence of reading those simple sentences that just flow and have these amazing imaginative stories. But that is so much harder than you think it is.
Mhm.
I could
Mhm.
much easier drop 85,000 words into a document to make a full-length novel than write a children's story. I don't know if I have that in me, but I think it would be so fun to come up with something. But one thing I really would love to do is write a romance with older characters. Um, I know that's something that a lot of people ask for, a lot of readers, like, oh, I'd love to see this. And I do see some of those up and coming, like from authors, and I love that idea. And I think it would be so fun to write older characters falling in love again, reigniting their marriage, anything like that. Most likely it would still, I mean, it would still be romance because I don't think I can write without romance. I've tried. um, but it might still be historical, but I just think writing older characters would be as the main characters in a love story would be super fun.
Well, as someone who's older, I think that would be great because,
Yeah.
just because we're older, we haven't lost our romantic feelings. So,
Yes. Yeah.
you know. Um, what else, Rebecca? Any other questions for her? We want to talk about Flora and Jensen in the book?
Well, I mean, I thought you did a fantastic job of, keeping them apart because it would have been really easy to just kind of let them like each other and be together and then, not have any conflict with each other. And I mean, sometimes that does work in stories. I've read a few that the characters got together early. It's not very common because most of the time they keep, authors don't like that and it causes issues with keeping the tension up and things. But I have read a few that are like that work. But you did a really good job of having them not really be at odds with each other so much, but just not together romantically. And I thought it was really difficult because they were in proximity constantly through the whole thing. So, can you tell us a little bit about the struggles you had with maybe keeping that balance?
Yeah, I actually find that I've I've been attempting to write stories where they fall in love a little sooner, and I tend to not, it just doesn't happen. Like it takes some time for me to build them up to that. And I think for Flora and Jensen especially, they had so many big traumatic things in their past. They had so much to work through as individuals, before they could really open themselves up to falling in love and to accepting someone else's love for them. Um, I think that made it a little easier to keep them apart because they just had a lot of internal work that they needed to do on themselves and to learn how to trust God with their futures, which is hard for all of us, but especially for those two with everything that they'd been through. It was just really difficult for them to do that and to trust that God had good things coming for them. And so I think that made it that gave me some things to work with as far as keeping them from falling in love too soon. And their personalities kind of clashed. That kind of grumpy sunshine trope. I love that. It was really fun to write sweet little grumpy Jensen.
Mhm.
Um, and I liked that. And I think their personalities clashing kind of added to that a little bit. Like gave their let there be just enough conflict and tension between them naturally that they weren't falling too hard too fast.
Well, and it too, they kind of they were definitely had different um motivations, because Jensen was all about safety, and the only reason he was even there was because he was, keeping everyone safe, and then her wanting to win, and that whole thing. I really also liked how you redeemed the villain, so to speak. That was good. I don't want to tell too much about that because if people haven't read it yet, which you need to read it, get it and read it. You'll want it because the other one's coming out later this year, so don't wait. Um, but that was really well done as well. It didn't, because sometimes when that happens, I think readers feel cheated if they're redeemed and it doesn't seem possible. But the way that you wrote it was very natural and organic and very much part of the personalities that you had built in. So I thought it was well done, and it was very
Oh, thank you.
nice twist
Yeah,
also.
I don't always redeem a villain, but I have redeemed a couple of them because there are always consequences, and I think that's what helps it be satisfying is that
Mhm.
there are consequences for what the villains have done in the story.
Mhm.
But I think that redemption and showing that they don't have to stay lost and that there might be hope for them even to find God in the future is it's important to show sometimes in a story where it works, because it's that's something that we all have to kind of face. Like, are we um are we too far gone for God to redeem us?
Mhm.
And we are not. That's it. We're never too far. And so
Right.
I like showing that there's a possibility of a villain not being left just a bad guy. You know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they could go on to have hope in their future too.
And I agree. I think that's what made it so satisfying to redeem him. The other thing, back to Jensen being so grumpy, but he was still likable, and that's a fine line sometimes to walk, to have someone who comes across as a grumpy personality, and
Yeah.
but he's still likable, and you're still kind of cheering for him because you can get. I don't know how you wrote that, but you can kind of see his heart. That his heart is good, even though this
Yeah.
exterior is. Um, you know.
Well, it's his backstory to explain. You did a good job of explaining where he came, where this attitude came from, and I think that's why it's easy to like him, even though he's grumpy or kind of negative at the beginning, because we understand exactly where that comes from, and it's not just because, right? It's not, he has a good reason for doing all the things he does. And that's, as an author, sometimes that's hard. We have to remember that that motivation has to be transparent, in order for the readers to understand our characters and to accept some of those things, like the grumpiness there, and his negativity sometimes, because if we understand him and know where it's coming from, then it's okay. So good lesson
Yeah.
for that.
Yes, I definitely think that's more good advice for writers, is that you can do these characters, you can write an unlikable character, if you really work to show, like you said, there's a reason. They're not just that way by personality. There's a reason for it. There's a reason we can understand that most people can um relate to and connect with a little bit, and that breeds that empathy. That okay, well, I can see how a person might react that way if they've gone through this and turn into Mr. Grumpy Pants over here, who's always worried about everybody. Yeah, it was very fun to try and write that, and I'm appreciate you guys saying that I did it successfully, because sometimes it's hard to see in your own writing. I mean, I knew who he was, I knew what I wanted to show, but it's hard to tell sometimes if that's coming across to others. So I appreciate knowing that you got to see the good parts of Jensen, and that it came from a good place, and or you know, it came out of him reacting to something bad, but he was trying to make good out of it. It just wasn't succeeding the way he was trying it at first. So I appreciate that you guys could see that.
Yeah, it was pretty evident. I recently read something that Brandon Sanderson wrote, and it was very interesting to me because he he said that, you know, he writes his stories because he likes what he's writing, but also because he doesn't feel like they're ever complete until the readers have added their own imagination to the story and made it real in their own mind. I thought that was so interesting, and I felt like your story was easy to it became alive in my head, and that makes it a good story.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were on the race. We were with them um, through all that. All right, so this was An Uncertain Road is the book we've been talking about. It is out now. We want everyone to pick it up and read it because it's fascinating, again, what you do with these characters. And then the next one is The Unexpected Catch, which is about baseball. I love baseball, so I can't wait to read this, especially
Yeah.
a female umpire. So what's the time frame on An Unexpected Catch?
An Unexpected Catch takes place in 1907, and it's set in Chicago, which, if you know historical baseball, that's a big deal. With the Cubs in Chicago in 1907. So the Cubs do actually come into play in the book, which was super fun to be able to write because we are big fans in this house. Yeah, we love baseball here, and so that was so fun to be able to write. And yes, it's a female umpire in the semi-professional Chicago City League. So based off, again, a real woman, actually teenager, who umpired not in Chicago, in Iowa, but in a semi-professional league. In She was 16 when she started, and she umpired hundreds of games over the course of several years and made enough money to put herself through college, and did what my character B does and goes on to promote physical education training in colleges. So it's a really fun story, but all that vintage baseball, super fun.
Yeah,
Cool.
sounds like it. And when does An Unexpected Catch come out?
That comes out November 19th of this year. So the cover is out. Pre-orders are up. If you would like to, if you know you're interested and you want to go pre-order that, you can find links on my website, which is abbeydowney.com, or it's on Amazon for pre-order. And if you are pre-ordering the ebook from sites that are not Amazon, you will get it a little early. So if that's something you're that excited, you can go look for some of those other links.
No, that's great.
Cool.
And Abby, you're the spelling of your name. It's Abbey, and then
Mhm.
Downey, also with an E.
Downey. Yes.
So
Mhm.
abbeydowney.com. Well, again, Abby, this has been really fun. We love the books. I'm already knowing I'm going to love the next one because I'm going to read it. But Uncertain Road, again, is out now. Really fun. A female race car driver in 1905. I mean, you got to read it. Check it out. today, and then look for an unexpected catch later this year. So thank you for your time and for writing such fun books with great characters.
Oh, thank you, ladies. It's been so fun to chat.
So we have coming up in July, we are going to be reviewing A Run at Love, which is a Tony Shiloh contemporary romance. And we're excited about that. So because this one has horses. Yay.
Rebecca loves her horses.
Yeah. So anyway, join us for that next month, and be sure to pick up An Uncertain Road and pre-order An Unexpected Catch in the meantime to keep you going. So thanks for joining us, and hey, we'll see you next time. Bye.